What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and it's late and I'm tired, but I wanted to make sure I got my top 10 video out. Yes, it'll be on Wednesday, and I'm sorry about that, but time just got away from me today. I was working on a very special project for an upcoming giveaway, but it involved a lot of very frustrating angles and a lot of woodworking, so more to come on that soon. But anyway, my patrons voted last week, and the way it's kind of worked out is to make sure I kind of appease everybody, I put out a poll, they vote, and whatever wins gets the first week gets that, and then the second week after that is what the runner-up is, which is what we're talking about this week, which is the top 10 magical secret spells for bards. So that is a little bit tricky, right, because there's a ton, it's basically every spell in the game, but this is my top 10. So anyway, if you want to see what the rules are and all that fun stuff about magical secrets, stay tuned. It's magical. Anyway, what's going on, folks? Let's talk about the rules. So it has to be a spell that is eligible for magical secrets, which means all official spells in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. We're not going to deal with any homebrew here. And for the purposes of this, I'm only going to pick spells that are not already on the Bards list. I know that seems like it makes sense, but, you know, there may be situations where you want to get more spells known off the Bards list. So we're only going to talk about ones that are non-Bard spells. Another thing is, I'm not really going to distinguish between whether you're lore bard or otherwise, so I'm just going to give you the spells that I like. This is my personal top 10 list. This isn't necessarily the best or the strongest. This is Ted's top 10 magical secrets. For the couple of bards that I've gotten a chance to play, some of these have obviously made it on that list, and that's pretty much it. So it'll cover, you know, whether if you're a lore bard, great, you'll get access to some of these early. If not, you'll have to wait till later on. Before we jump into number 10, though, I did want to say I have a 50K giveaway going on. We broke 50,000 subscribers here on YouTube. So I have a massive, like, 23 prize giveaway, including a bunch of custom hex chests from Elderwood Academy that are, you know, a limited run of 10 that look like this and have the Nerd Immersion logo on it and, like, my signature on the back and stuff like that, as well as a chance for me to just run you a game, you and up to 4 of your friends. There'll be a link in the description, and all you really have to do is check out the social media and sign up for it. But if you haven't taken a chance to subscribe, I would really appreciate it if you did so. Anyway, on to the next, well, the first number, I guess, or number 10. Number 10. Destructive Wave. I absolutely love this spell, and for the most part, it's hidden behind 2 classes. One will be the Paladin, which unfortunately, as a 5th level spell for a Paladin, you're not going to get this to level 17. So it's very rare for any Paladin to ever even gain access to this awesome spell. And by the time you're getting a 5th level spell at level 17, the casters and other folks are just going to probably be able to outdamage you with straight spell damage anyway. So I guess the real way to truly make the best of it was to be a Tempest Domain Cleric, but another way to do that is to be a Bard. It is thunder damage as well, so I feel like it fits with the Bard, and you could choose to flavor this however you want, but it says you strike the ground, creating a burst of divine energy that ripples out from you. It is a Constitution saving throw. It is a 30-foot radius. It's each creature within 30 feet, so it's 30 feet on all directions. Con save or take 5d6 thunder damage, as well as 5d6 radiant or necrotic, you get to pick, and be knocked prone. If they succeed, they take half damage and aren't knocked prone. I think it's definitely better if you could get this as say like a level 10 bard with your magical secrets, because it's going to do a decent amount of damage, it has the potential to knock prone, and thunder damage and radiant or necrotic damage are pretty hard to resist. There's not a lot of creatures that have that. 10d6 damage is also nice, but it is a con save and most monsters have that. So that's why it's so high on this list. I just really, really love this spell, and not enough people technically have access to it, so that's why I try to get it when I can as a bard. Number 9. Wish. Everybody knows Wish. They know what it does. It does a ton of amazing things. But I'll put it so high up on this list because, or so low, depending on how you look at it, how many games get to the point where you're level 17, and you wouldn't even be able to get this, I think, till level 18 Bard is when you get your magical secrets. And so it's very rare that games get that high. And also, Wish is a spell that has inborn into it the ability to make it so you can never cast it ever again. And it can do pretty much almost anything in the game, depending on how your DM runs it and how you word things. But it can duplicate any 8th level or lower spell. So that's a great way. That basically gives you access to every other class's spell list for level 8 and below. You don't need the requirements, including any components. So this could potentially be a resurrection option for you. And then you can also do all the list of things here. 25, one object worth 25,000 gold pieces that isn't magic. Allow 20 creatures to regain all hit points and get the effect of greater restoration. 10 creatures gain a damage resistance to a damage type of your choice. That's a really powerful one because these are the abilities that it can basically do with no chance of like bad things happening. These are the things it can do. And that's a pretty good one because don't forget things like bludgeoning, piercing, slashing are damage types. So in theory, with a wish, you could grant your party permanent resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, as well as all the other elemental types. Up to 10 creatures you can see gain immunity to a single spell or other magical effect. For instance, you can make yourself and all companions immune to a Lich's Life Drain attack. That is a very specific one, but if you know you're going up against a specific type of enemy or a specific target, that could be something to consider. And then you can undo a single recent event by forcing a reroll of any roll made within the last round, including your turn. Reality reshapes itself to accommodate this result. For example, a wish spell could undo an opponent's successful save, a foe's critical hit, or a friend's failed saving throw. You can force the reroll to be made with advantage or disadvantage, and you can choose whether to use the reroll or the original roll. And then it says you might be able to do something above and beyond this, but this is the one that's left kind of up to the DM's whim. This is the one that a lot of people think about, the kind of monkey's paw style wish. What are you going to do? How are you going to word it in such a way that it's ironclad, that nobody can get weasel word into it or anything? And it says the stress of casting this spell to produce any effect other than duplicating another spell weakens you. So if you do the spell of 8th level or lower, there's no issue. All of these options here, or like the whatever other world shaping crazy one you might want to do, they have the chance to weaken you. After enduring that stress, each time you cast a spell until you finish a long rest, you take a D10 necrotic. Each time you cast a spell, any spell, you take a D10 necrotic damage per level of that spell. It can't be reduced or prevented in any way, and in addition, your strength drops to 3 if it isn't already 3 or lower for 2d4 days. For each of these days that you spend resting and doing nothing more than light activity, your remaining recovery time decreases by 2 days, and there's a 33% chance that you're unable to cast a wish ever again if you suffer this stress. So super powerful 9th level spell, but how often are you actually going to get a chance to use it? Number 8. I feel like this one often gets overlooked when it comes to Bards' magical secrets because they're usually focused on the higher level spells, right? Even if you're a lore bard, you can start access with 3rd level spells with your level 6 magical secrets. So I feel like people start with level 3 and above spells, but there's something to be said about Pass Without Trace. It is a wonderfully fantastic buff, a 1 hour concentration plus 10 to stealth checks, and you can't be tracked by magical means. Obviously, we've all seen this used to great effect in a number of different games, and it's limited access to this spell, right? Druid, Ranger, Trickery, Domain, Cleric, and then Circle of the Land, Druid, but that's already a Druid. So if you don't have a Ranger, a Druid, or a Trickery, Domain, Cleric in your party, which is highly possible that you don't, and you're going to be doing possibly stealth-style missions, or you have someone like a Paladin or a Fighter with heavy armor in your party, you may benefit from Pass Without Trace. Again, it's not probably a choice everybody's going to want to make, but I do think it should be looked at. It's very powerful. It's a useful buff. And, you would have access to a game-changing stealth utility spell. Number 7. Telekinesis is a great spell. It has a ton of awesome utility. I've seen it used to great effect in campaigns that I've played in and run. And it's unfortunately not a bard spell, just accessed by the sorcerer, the wizard, and the great old one warlock. And it's just so good. So let's take a look at what telekinesis does, right? So it's the ability to move things with your mind. We all know what telekinesis is. It's 10 minutes concentration, and it works out to 60 feet. As an action, and each round after that, you can exert your will on a creature or an object, and you can do different things based on that. You can affect the same object round after round, or choose a new one at any time. If you switch, the previous one's ignored. It loses that effect. If you choose a creature, you can move a huge or smaller creature. You could try to anyway. Make an ability check with your spellcasting ability contested by their strength check. If you win the contest, you move up the creature up to 30 feet in any direction, including upward, but not beyond the range of this spell, which is 60 feet. Until the end of your turn, the creature is restrained in your telekinetic grip. A creature lifted upward is suspended in midair. On subsequent rounds, you can use your action to attempt to maintain your telekinetic grip on the creature by repeating this contest. So it's a spellcasting ability check. I will remind you that as a bard, having Jack of all trades, you add half of your proficiency bonus to any ability check with which you are not proficient. You are technically not proficient with this, so this is going to get the benefit of adding half of your proficiency bonus to this check that you're going to make. So it will be your charisma modifier plus your half of your proficiency bonus plus your roll versus a strength check from them. Not a strength saving throw, just a strength check. And there's a little bit of a combo that we'll talk about when we get to the end of this. For an object, you can move an object that weighs up to 1,000 pounds. If it isn't being worn or carried, you automatically move it up to 30 feet in any direction, but not beyond that range, the range of the spell. If the object is worn or carried by a creature, you can make an ability check with your spellcasting modifier contested by a strength check. If you succeed, you pull the object away from the creature and move it up to 30 feet in any direction, but not beyond the range of the spell. You can exert fine control on objects with your telekinetic grip, such as manipulating a simple tool, opening a door or container, stowing or retrieving an item, or from an open container, or pouring the contents of a vial. So it has a lot of utility. I'll tell you an example I've used in one of my games. We were in Princes of the Apocalypse. They were fighting one of kind of like the main villains of the game, and one of the ranger in the party opened up a bag of holding, and the wizard used telekinesis versus one of the person with one of like the super powerful elemental weapons, and telekinetically pulled the weapon into a bag of holding, and they shut the bag of holding, and then therefore it's on a different plane of existence, could not be recalled to the villain. Another thing I wanted to talk about, which we'll bring it up again later, but is the one very interesting Bards spell, Glibness, which if you're unfamiliar with, Glibness is an 8th level spell, and is a duration of an hour, so this would be a situational thing, but until the spell ends, whenever you make a charisma check, you can replace the number you roll with a 15. Additionally, no matter what you say, magic that would determine if you're telling the truth indicates you were being truthful. Well, remember, if you go back here, telekinesis, for example, you make a spellcasting ability check. Well, what is that? That is a charisma check for you. You're already taking your charisma modifier and adding half of your proficiency bonus from Jack of all trades, and if you have glibness up, your roll minimum is a 15. So you will pretty much always succeed. Not 100% of the time, but it's something to consider. Number 6. Rary's Telepathic Bond. Another super useful utility spell that I love that doesn't get a ton of use in games that I play in, and it's unfortunate. It is typically hidden behind only the wizard, although the Unity Domain Cleric, which is an Unearthed Arcana, technically has access to it. But it's also a ritual spell, which is something to consider here as well, because bards have access to ritual casting. So if you have this, you could, in theory, cast this as a ritual. As an action to cast, it lasts for an hour, non-concentration, and you can forge a telepathic link between up to 8 willing creatures of your choice, physically or psychically linking them all for the duration. Creatures of intelligence of 2 aren't affected, and until the spell ends, the targets can communicate telepathically through the bond, whether or not they have a common language. The communication is possible over any distance, though it doesn't extend to other planes. So this, as I feel like a spell that a lot of groups think that they're inadvertently using, which is something that always seems to happen when people are discussing combat plans during a combat. That's like a sort of small pet peeve for me, where like we are in combat and we're all fighting. You technically don't have time for your characters to have like a powwow and discuss what you want to do in combat with the enemy listening in, because they will know what you're planning to do. Like, I know it's like sort of like a weird metagaming, we're talking out of game, but that always just kind of bugs me. Like, if you're in combat, you do what you're going to do on your turn. You're unable to communicate with your party unless you have a means to do so. You can either do it out loud, and let the enemy know what you're going to do, or have something like Rary's Telepathic Bond, where you can just think it and your party can hear it, so it's completely, preventable from the enemy of hearing it. And again, the fact that this is a ritual spell, this is something you could continue to keep up all throughout the day with no loss of spell slot. And again, you could use it with a spell slot if you really wanted to. Number 5. Fireball or Lightning Bolt. They kind of both serve the same purpose with a little bit of different utility, but these are the big blasty spells that the wizards get at level 3, and they're typically sorcerer and wizard only, though some of them do have other options, right? Like a light cleric, a fiend warlock, an artillerist artificer, and the 2 unearthed arcanas, Circle of Wildfire and Genie. Warlock can get access to Fireball, Lightning Bolt is sorcerer wizard, Mountain Druid, Lurker in the Deep, Unearthed Arcana, Warlock, and Armorer, Artificer, also Unearthed Arcana. And they're a 3rd level spell, they're an action to do, and they do 8d6 damage of a type. The Lightning Bolt's a 100-foot long line, 5 feet wide. For dexterity saving throw, Fireball is 150 feet, and then explodes in a 20-foot radius. They're classic spells, right? Everybody is familiar with these if you've been playing D&D. Fireball has a nice big radius and can do damage to flammable objects. Lightning Bolt has a little bit more control, harder to line up, but things to consider. Again, you may not be like a blasty bard, you may be a utility healing bard, but having this in your back pocket is never a bad thing. Number 4. Wall of Force. Wall of Force is a fantastic battlefield control utility spell that can be immensely frustrating to use against other players, DMs, etc., if they're unaware of how it works. So its concentration lasts for 10 minutes. You make an invisible wall. You choose the orientation as horizontal, vertical barrier, or in an angle. You can be free floating, so in midair, or resting on a solid surface. You can form it into a hemispherical dome or sphere with a radius of up to 10 feet, or you can shape a flat surface made up of up to 10 by 10 by 10 panels. Each panel must be contiguous with another panel. In any form, the wall is a 1/4 inch thick. It lasts for the duration of up to 10 minutes. If the wall cuts through a creature's space when it appears, the creature is pushed to one side of the wall, your choice. That's also super abusable. Nothing can physically pass through the wall. It is immune to all damage and can't be dispelled by Dispel Magic. A Disintegrate spell destroys the wall, however. The spell also extends into the ethereal plane, blocking ethereal travel through it. Reminder that Wall of Force is a 5th level spell, Disintegrate is a 6th level spell. So in theory, if you have this, it may not be super possible unless the DM has a higher level enemy fighting you who happens to have Disintegrate. But obviously you can use this for all sorts of things. You can use this to basically block off a group of enemies. They're going to stay in your Wall of Force over there. You guys keep on going through the dungeon. You can, again, the fact that when you cast it through a space, you can choose which way they're shunted. You could shunt them off a cliff into a bed of lava. You could cast it basically at like ankle height, right? If you wanted in a long flat plane and have you and all your party shunted to the top of it and all of the enemies shunted below it, and now they're trapped underneath it 5 foot, laying flat on the floor underneath a Wall of Force that they cannot destroy unless they have access to Disintegrate, and you can just waltz right over top of them and out of the room. I was in a game where we used this to, there's supposed to be like a treacherous rope bridge lava like trap, and the wizard and the party just cast a Wall of Force across the bed of lava, and we just walked across it. Completely negated that whole encounter. Wall of Force has a lot of interesting ways to use it. And again, it's typically a wizard-only spell, but Oath of Redemption Paladin can get access to it, which is really interesting as a Paladin, but it won't be till level 17. And then Artillerist Artificer, as well as the Armorer Artificer, which is Unearthed Arcana. So again, a super powerful, super useful spell. Definitely can have a lot of interesting combinations depending on what you think of and what other spells you have access to. Number 3. Find Steed or find Greater Steed, depending on when you can get access to them or when you prefer. Anybody who's played a Paladin and knows about the Find Steed spell, it is an amazing spell. It can basically give you an additional party member for the purposes of dealing damage and, helping with, travel and all sorts of stuff. So, as a base, Find Steed is a 2nd level spell and gets you access to the forms of a warhorse, a pony, a camel, an elk, or a mastiff. Again, you can use these for transport. You can use these to pull wagons, to haul different things. A warhorse is a pretty decent, party member to deal a decent amount of damage. It serves you as your mount in and out of combat. You fight as a seamless unit while mounted on your steed. You can make any spell that you cast that targets only you, target them. This could be healing. This could be teleportation, right? If you happen to have Misty Step. Let's say if you took that as a magical secret, you could Misty Step and bring it with you. You have, I think, Dimension Door. You could bring it with you. There's a bunch of options and things you can do with the share spell options of Find Steed as a bard. And when your steed drops to 0 hit points, it disappears. When it's in a mile of you, you can communicate with it telepathically. It also bumps up whatever the steed's previous intelligence is up to 6, and it can understand a language of your choice that you speak. So you can do a lot of interesting stuff with Find Steed, the 2nd level spell, and then Find Greater Steed, the 4th level spell, is going to give you a lot more options, including flight-based options. So you've got a griffin, a pegasus, Peryton, a direwolf, a rhinoceros, or a saber-toothed tiger. And that'll give you a ton of options for, again, combat utility, for travel, make yourself just look badass, flying on a pegasus as a bard playing music. You'd be pretty sweet to do that. And it just really depends on which one you'd prefer to have and at what level you'd get it. Number 2. You knew it'd be somewhere on this list. It is one of the best spells, if not the best spell in the game. And it is just super useful to have on anybody. And even if you have a cleric in the party and you're a bard and you gain access to this, you will not be disappointed, because 2 Spirit Guardians is basically just a meat grinder for your enemies. So it's a 3rd level spell, self range, 10 or 15-foot radius from you, lasts for 10 minutes. And then when you cast it, you can designate any creatures to be unaffected by it, which is nice because if there's creatures in the area that you can't see, to designate as friendly. If they're invisible, they will take the damage if they enter the Spirit Guardians, thus potentially making them known to you. While in that area, their speed is halved. It's also interesting because it says their speed is halved is not considered difficult terrain. So if you happen to have difficult terrain around you and they enter Spirit Guardians, their speed is cut in half again a second time. And when they enter the area for the first time or start their turn there, they must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, they take 3d8 radiant damage or necrotic damage if you're evil. And on a success, they take half as much. And then for each level you upcast it above 3rd, it does an additional d8 of damage. So you can see you could just potentially be doing up to 24 damage a turn for 10 minutes while still having this up and doing other things in the meantime. Again, typically only accessible by clerics and Oath of the Crown Paladin. We may see that change when we get the class feature variants in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. But again, as a bard, you will not be upset to have this. Number 1. Counterspell. It is one of the best spells in the game. It is exceptionally useful. It's one of the only spells and abilities in the game, there are a few out there, but that lets you basically completely undo something that an enemy is doing. As we stated before with Telekinesis, you add half your proficiency bonus to your ability check made to counter higher level spells, right? So Counterspell is a 3rd level spell. It works on a reaction when a creature within 60 feet of you is casting a spell. You attempt to interrupt a creature in the process of casting a spell. If the creature is casting a spell of 3rd level or lower, it immediately succeeds. If it's casting a spell of 4th level or higher, you can make an ability check using your spellcasting ability. The DC is 10 plus the spell's level. On a success, the creature fails and has no effect. And if you cast it out of a higher level slot, it just raises the level of spell you can counter. Right? If you cast it out of a 4th level slot, it counters a 4th or below. Out of a 7th level slot, it's a 7th or below. So if you happen, so you'll have Jack of all trades, you'll be adding half your proficiency bonus to this check. So you've got your charisma modifier plus half your proficiency bonus plus the d20, and you're shooting for somewhere in the range of 11 to counter a 1st level spell or 19 to counter a 9th level spell. Also, if you happen to be a lore bard in your higher level, you can self-inspire yourself, adding potentially, I think, of either a d10 or a D12, depending on the level, to an ability check that you make. This could be said ability check, and then boost that. And if you happen to gain access to some magic items, like things like the Stone of Good Luck, which boost your ability checks, like things like this will really go a long way. Again, Counterspell typically only accessible by the Sorcerer, Warlock, Wizard, and the Oath of the Redemption Paladin, as well as now the Oath of the Watcher, Unearthed Arcana Paladin subclass. I always thought it was weird that Bards don't have Counterspell. I kind of also stand by everyone should have access to Counterspell. If you can cast spells, why can't you counter them? Especially because every class that can cast spells gets access to Dispel Magic. Why don't they all get access to Counterspell? I guess you could make an argument that, like, maybe if you have Counterspell, it can only counter arcane spells because sorcerers, warlock, and wizards can do it. But like a Counterspell can counter divine magic from a cleric or a paladin just the same. So I'm more for giving more people access to Counterspell just because it, you know, like that shouldn't be a determining factor. Like I'm going to play an Oath of Redemption Paladin, even though I don't really want to play it, but it has Counterspell, so that's awesome. You know, I don't see why, like, again, if you can cast a spell and dispel magic, what's the jump that only sorcerers, warlock, and wizards can do to learn how to counter it actively? Guys, coincidentally, some of those are also the ones that get shield, which is to counter physical damage. And, you know, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think every class that casts spells, and by that I don't mean like subclasses necessarily, but like, you know, paladins, clerics, druids, rangers, should they have access to Counterspell? Or do you think not so much? As you know, if you've watched the video on my channel, I'm all for Counterspell. I know other people have other opinions, but I like Counterspell. Also, our reference to glibness from earlier on, where you can replace any roll you make for a charisma check with a 15, glibness would also factor in to the use of Counterspell. So something you can consider if you're going to get into a combat with spellcasters, pre-enter yourself with glibness, go into that combat and not have to worry about it at all. So anyway, folks, that's my top 10 magical secrets spells. Again, there's a ton to choose from. I'm not a huge fan of taking cantrips with magical secrets. I've played with people who've taken like Eldritch Blast or Guidance for their magical secrets, and to me that seems like a waste. I also like Mass Healing Word, but that may end up becoming a Bard spell with the Unearthed Arcana class feature variants, so we may not need that either. Let me know your favorite or your go-to magical secret. My guess is it was probably on this list because it was either Find Steed, Spirit Guardians, or Counterspell. But if it's, or Wish, if it was something else, let me know. Again, there'll be a link in the description for my giveaway for 50,000 subscribers. Good luck to everyone who entered. Also, if you entered the Icewind Dale giveaway, check your email. I emailed the winners and let them know. And thank you again to my patrons over on Patreon for voting for this topic, as well as continuing to support me and the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.